Your teenager is quiet all the time now, and you don't know why. What's more, their answers are shorter than they used to be. The conversations that used to happen in the car, at the dinner table, last thing at night, have all stopped. And the harder you try to get things back the way they used to be, the further away they seem to get. Most parents think this is just what teenagers do, that this distance is normal. It starts somewhere around 13, and there's not much that can be done about it. But it didn't start at 13. In fact, it started the day your child quietly learned that honesty wasn't worth it anymore. And most importantly, there was one small moment that was probably forgotten by you entirely, whereas your child remembers it perfectly, like it was yesterday. Then something changed. Once that lesson is learned, the silence that follows doesn't stay still. It grows. And as a result, the door that used to stay open closes, quietly, and neither of you quite noticed when it happened and why. But here's the good news. Decades of research into Danish family culture explains why some children never stop talking to their parents, and why others learn, very early on, that silence is the safer choice. Here's what most parents miss and almost always misunderstand about teenagers. At first, when your teenager goes quiet, the instinct is to try and get closer to them, with more questions. Next, more check-ins, more spot checks. And from your side, that makes complete sense. You're worried. Clearly, you care. You're trying to stay connected to your child, yet, from their point of view, something completely different is happening. What's more, every new layer of monitoring is confirmation that the only privacy they have left is inside their own head. And this is where the shift begins, and where it gets harder to see. Because on the surface, everything looks fine. But here's the problem. They get smarter about what they share, if they share, even though they appear more agreeable on the outside. Grades are about okay, general attitude seems to be getting better, rules are being followed, and somewhere in all of that, you stop worrying because of it all looks on the surface. Because what looks like a teenager who's doing well is sometimes a teenager who's learned something much darker. They've learned that the real version of themselves, the struggling version, the one carrying feelings you couldn't possibly know about or imagine, that version isn't safe to show at home. So they don't show it to you anymore. Only friends could understand and will get the real me. And the real truth is obedience isn't trust. It never was or never will be. In fact, it's camouflage. To put this another way, the teenager who's still arguing with you, still slamming doors, still pushing back, that teenager believes on some level that you might listen to them, that something could change. Whereas the one who stopped fighting back shrugs their shoulders and says, fine, and walks away, that teenager has already made the decision. Actually, nothing I say, nothing I do, or nothing I feel is going to change anything around here anyway. So, what's the point? That's their conclusion, and it's a quiet, private decision that most parents never even know has been made because it doesn't look like a problem on the outside. And it simply looks like they're finally coming around and getting it. Unfortunately, we're only seeing half the picture when this happens. So let's look at the other half now. The truth is, you've probably forgotten when it happened, that it even happened, whereas your teenager hasn't forgotten and remembers it like it was yesterday. Here's a pattern that keeps appearing that hopefully will explain a lot. In the comments section in these type of parenting videos on YouTube, thousands of teenagers and adults writing out the exact moment they stopped telling their parents everything. And surprisingly, age didn't matter. Everyone remembered it like it just happened. And it wasn't the dramatic big moments you'd expect when it would happen. It was shockingly always the small ones, the wee moments that had the biggest impacts. One such moment was when a teenage girl wrote a poem called Listen. Because she wanted her mum to understand what she was going through and how it felt, after her mother read the title, she said, "That's what I want you to do," and handed it back, which devastated her and prompted her to write about it 23 years later, she still remembered exactly how it felt to this day. Likewise, a young boy fell for his first girlfriend and didn't know what to do about it. So, he went to his dad. And his dad told him they'd probably break up anyway, so don't bother with it at all. And that moment taught him never speak about his emotions again with his father. And the worst part for everyone is, these are just regular afternoons in life. Conversations that lasted seconds, that most parents have no memory of. However, their teenagers never forgot. And the reality, the real reason those moments didn't register, is because they didn't look like anything at the time. Just another Tuesday with my kids, and I've loads to get done today anyway. Yet that's what nobody tells you. Relationships don't usually break in dramatic scenes. They break in quiet ones, experienced completely differently on either side of the table. And unfortunately, to the parent, it was nothing. To the child, it was devastating feedback. Clear, lasting feedback about what was safe to say and what wasn't at home. Not only that, but after enough of those moments, silence stops being a choice and starts becoming the only logical response. And this is the surprising part. This isn't a character flaw, or even about who your teenager really is. It's more about the environment they learn to navigate, who they feel they must become. But the good news is, if the environment created the silence, the environment is what changes it. And a small country in Northern Europe figured that out decades ago, through a cultural value so deeply embedded in how Danish families operate that most Danish parents couldn't name it if you asked. And that's exactly where this story goes next, and where things get interesting. The Danish word is Åbenhed. It translates roughly as openness together. But that translation doesn't carry the full impact of what it looks like inside a Danish home. Danish parents make it a point to talk to their teenagers about the hard parts of life, not the sanitized version, the real one you think you're not supposed to talk about. Money worries, relationship difficulties, fears they haven't resolved, and mistakes they've made in the past and still regret to this day. The messy, uncomfortable stuff about being human that most of us were quietly taught to hide from our children. And the amazing part isn't that Danish parents have these conversations with their teenagers. It's why they have them. These conversations aren't to burden them or to make them responsible for adult problems. They do it to send a signal, one that says, truth is safe in this house, that truth is the foundation of our family. Then something shifts. Because when a teenager watches a parent be genuinely honest about something difficult and isn't pretending everything is fine, they learn something about what relationships can actually be like, and they learn that honesty doesn't only work when life is going well. It works all the time in this family, and always will. Researchers who study Danish family communication have a name for homes where any topic can be raised openly. They call them conversation-oriented families. I know this sounds so basic, but the data on these families are striking. Teenagers in them are significantly more likely to go to their parents first when something goes wrong in their lives. Not to their friends, their parents. And they are significantly less likely to use lying or go silent as a way of managing hard feelings or difficult situations, because there's no point in that. And as a result, Denmark consistently ranks in the top 3 countries in the world for adolescent well-being, including family relationships and trust between parents and teenagers. That isn't a coincidence. That's what happens when honesty becomes the foundation, rather than a one-sided expectation within the family structure. Then things change for the better because, once that foundation exists, something else becomes possible. A crazy little thing the Danes call Demokratisk Opdragelse, which translates to democratic upbringing. This is where Danish teenagers hold genuine influence in family decisions, not the performance of being consulted by parents, where the adults nod and then do what they were always going to do anyway. This is actual influence, where sometimes the teenager's view changes the outcome and direction of the family. And here's why that matters so much. A teenager who knows their voice can change things has no reason to go quiet. A teenager with real ownership inside the family doesn't need to find their power by disappearing from the family. So, if you are in this situation right now, the one where your teenager is technically still there but somehow already gone, the Danes would say something specific about that. They might say your teenager learned, somewhere along the way, that it wasn't safe to be seen, that their opinions didn't move anything, that the decisions had already been made before you opened your mouth, and your teenager knew it. And here's the problem with this. You don't change the latter by demanding more from your teenager, by asking them more questions to get them to open up. You change it by making honesty safe, and by making them genuinely part of what happens next in your home. Do that, and you might be surprised how much they've actually been waiting to say. And this will make the next part so much more understandable and easier. We always assumed that a teenager who stopped fighting was a teenager who was fine, that the quiet meant peace, and that shrug meant acceptance. However, it turns out a teenager who stops fighting has decided that fighting doesn't work, that being heard isn't possible, that the real version of themselves isn't welcome around here. And once that decision gets made, the silence that follows isn't peace at all. It's an exit. That's the shift that's missed by most of us. The old red flag was a slammed door. The new one is the closed door, eyes on a phone, one-word answers. A teenager who's technically present, but never really is. Because the teenager who's still arguing still believes you might listen, but the one who's stopped has already gone somewhere much harder to reach. But this is the great part, and is where the evidence points and what the research is absolute on. They can come back, they want to come back, and the emotional distance isn't permanent. They didn't leave because they stopped loving you. They left because staying in the relationship as it existed cost them too much emotionally, and it was just easier to disappear than to keep trying. So, what actually changes the situation? Knowing that the silence isn't peace is a good place to start, and that the lying isn't dishonesty. It's the price of surviving in a home where honesty stopped working, or seemed to matter. Whereas Åbenhed says, you don't fix either of those things by demanding more. You fix them by going first. Tell your teenager one true thing about yourself you'd normally keep quiet, not bigger confession, nothing dramatic or inappropriate, but something small and real. A worry you might be carrying, a decision you got wrong, and remember, you're not fixing everything in one conversation. You're starting a different experiment. You're building a different structure, a new foundation, one where the rules are different this time, where truth has somewhere safe to land now. Show them that, not by saying it, but by doing it, by example, and then watch what happens. Because once they feel that shift, they'll start testing it to see if it's real. Carefully at first, but they'll test it, and you'll know the shift is happening when that starts. So maybe the most important thing to take from all of this is something the Danes understood long before the research caught up. Your teenager isn't giving you a hard time, they're having one. And every teenager who's gone quiet, who's pulled away, who answers in one word when they used to talk for hours, they're all still asking the same question. Is it safe to be myself here? You now have an answer to give them. We hope that this video has helped you understand your teenager a little bit better. There's also something worth knowing about where a lot of this actually starts, because the patterns that make honesty feel unsafe in a teenager often begins long before the teenage years, back when they were toddlers and the family dynamic was still being written. We did a video on the Japanese approach to raising independent, responsible children from an early age. And once you've watched that, this one will make a lot more sense. Watch it next, and thank you for watching.